Joining us now, former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, our buddy, Mr. Frank Corrado. How you doing, Frank?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Yeah, fantastic. Watched you last night on TSN covering the top prospects game. We'll get to that in a second, including North Vancouver's Connor Bedard. It was feisty out there.
Ever.
Yeah, but first things first, you spent a couple of years with the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, 2016, 2017, where you overlapped with Rick Tocchet. Tell us a little bit about the new head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, the guy you got to know in Pittsburgh.
Who was granted early in his coaching career at that point.
Well, in his assistant coaching career.
So I got to see him as an assistant. I think that's a great role for him personally, just because I think that's his strength, is his ability to connect with players, relate to guys. I think he kind of connects with players on a personal level, and I think that was probably the biggest reason why Phil Kessel was able to have so much success there. The way Mike Sullivan runs his ship, he's similar to Torts in a way where it's very black and white. He can be very blunt at times, and they're kind of cut from the same cloth that way. And having a guy like Tocchet there was big for a guy like Phil, where, if Phil ever needed to vent about anything or get something off his chest, it was he could go straight to Rick and he could say whatever he wanted. And there was a certain level of trust and respect between the two guys. And so, when I see Tocchet as a head coach now, I would imagine he has a lot of that with his players. That's his bread and butter. That's his MO. That's kind of the coach that I see him as. I don't necessarily see Tocchet as this X's and O's structure guru. That's not how I see him. I see him as a guy who, if you take JT Miller, for example, you need a guy who can connect to this guy and find a way to just keep him dialed in or keep him on the right track. That would be the strength of a guy like Tocchet. I think the first game I ever played as a Penguin was in Buffalo. And so I got there in the morning skate, and you meet everyone. And then Tocchet brings me in. He goes, "Hey, we're just going to go over all the systems." And it's pretty basic stuff because essentially you're doing the same thing in the minors. It's just they just want to give you a little refresher as to what they're doing, and maybe there might be some subtle differences. But, for the duration of that 15-minute conversation, maybe not even, we just kind of chatted. We chatted about hockey, what kind of player you are, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, we do this, even little tidbits like watch Sid out there or watch Letang, watch these guys, watch how they do things. And so I appreciated that he had a very good pulse on things that way. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be his second go in recent memory as a head coach, and he probably has a better roster than he ever did in Arizona, to be honest with. And I know that sounds crazy right now with the way the Canucks are and the shape they're in, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It's funny, we're realizing now as we peel all this back that while they will undoubtedly have their differences, and we can tell just their personalities are different, they are still both, Bruce and Rick, they're players, coaches, both of them, just in their own different way.
They totally are. And the comments after the game last night, some coaches would deliver those kinds of comments, and you would be like, whoa, man, that's kind of offside. It would make a little more of a shockwave, let's say. But even just watching his mannerisms and the way he talks and the way he delivered the message, I still kind of saw it as a player's coach vibe, a guy who's very much on your level, gets down to your level to talk to you, doesn't talk at you. You know what I mean? That's one of the things some coaches will do. They talk at you, where I think Rick, one of his strengths is he's talking with you. He's right there in the fight with you. And I think a lot of guys appreciate that. So, when he's saying, he goes, I don't know what to say. This team is soft. I feel like it also resonates with the players because he makes that personable kind of touch and connection. If you're a player and you're watching that media availability, or you see a clip on Twitter after, and you're like, all right, we got to look internally here. There's something going on now if he's saying it the way he did.
Frank, we've heard so much about practice habits since Rutherford and Alvin got here. Now they have the coach who's going to institute the type of practices that they want to see. Tell us what practices were like with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Can you replicate the Penguins' practices when you don't have a Sidney Crosby out there on the ice?
It's a good point because he's the hardest working guy in practice and he really drives the bus for them in that regard. Here's a Pittsburgh Penguins practice for you. It'll be about 45 minutes. The very first thing you're going to do when you get onto the ice is you're going to run some type of like small area game. So your brain has to get turned on right away. There's no like some teams I've played on where they'll do 15 minutes of flow drills, mindless stuff where you just skate around and shoot a puck. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to get into practice. Like from the second you step on the ice, there's something that needs to engage you mentally and physically. So you need to be ready to go. And then we get into like a little more high tempo drills, stuff without a ton of pressure, and it just builds from there. So now you're doing like your high tempo 1-on-0, 2-on-0, turns into like a 2-on-2 with gap and then some physical body contact. Then it'll turn into some 3-on-2 that'll morph into some 5-on-5 play, maybe some special teams, and then some different kind of situations maybe you want to work on. But it's quick, it's up tempo. There's no wasted time. And, maybe some coaches like to ease into things like the way Sullivan and Pittsburgh did things. It was like, get yourself ready because we're going out there and we're going to work and we're not staying out there for an hour. And there's going to be time for you afterwards if you want to work on some stuff. And guess who was always out there after practice working on stuff or grabbing guys and saying, hey, can you pass to me here? Can you apply some pressure here? Like it was Sid, right? And so they obviously don't have that guy, but you look to have someone who kind of leads the charge in practice and is that workhorse type.
I wonder, guys, and this is just my interpretation, so he didn't explicitly say this. I wonder if what we heard from Rick Tocchet last night was him wanting and almost pleading with Elias Pettersson to be Sidney Crosby, saying, I need you to be out there setting that example. Wow. That's not going to be JT Miller because he's very much a different personality than Sidney Crosby. But I could see Elias Pettersson becoming the personality of Sidney Crosby.
I don't think it happens overnight, right? Like you want to know, like the best way to do it. If you're Tocchet, meet up for Pettersson, like meet up with him for a coffee somewhere outside of the rink and tell him about your journey as a coach watching Sidney Crosby and watch the evolution of Sidney Crosby and what he did. And like, I think like we talked about it earlier, like that's the strength of Rick Tocchet. Maybe you get outside the arena, just a different environment, different feel to it. And you share to this guy, like, listen, I see you as this kind of player and I think you have what it takes. And I've seen it firsthand. And you kind of instill that. Like it doesn't happen overnight. And let me ask you this, like Bo Horvat's the captain. He is that guy for the Vancouver Canucks, really. Like he's just a workhorse kind of guy, like he always has been. And but I don't know how much more you can expect from that guy when all year you haven't met or come close to his number on a contract. You've been talking about trading him, and like I just feel like maybe that ship has sailed a little bit. Yeah. But like Bo would never lead on to that. You know what I mean? Like he's too good of a pro. He's too good of a guy to ever lead that on.
100%. And frankly, this is the Bo apparently he went to Tocchet and said, look, for however long I'm here, I'm your guy. Don't worry, I'll be your leader. I'll be your everything. And, that speaks, of course, to the character of Bo Horvat, but I think we all know where this is heading between now and March 3rd for Horvat. You did the top prospects game last night in the studio, analyzing the events from the Langley Events Center. 6 different British Columbians in the game. And Connor Bedard played like he had a stone in his shoe. He was a little feisty out there. Tell us about the night for the North Vancouver.
Yeah, it was one. We got to interview him during warm-up, similar to how TNT does things. And as the game went on, I was like, did we maybe piss this guy off with some dumb questions in warm-up or something? But listen, so it was one of the first shifts of the game. He gets cross-checked, draws a penalty. And then, guys were definitely taking runs or shots at him. And then he gets a really good chance in the first period. It's like a typical Bedard shift where he kind of grabs the puck in his own zone, end-to-end, good opportunity on net. It was probably his second or third good chance of the game, had nothing to show for it. Then he takes a run. I believe it was Oliver Bonk of the London Knights, takes a healthy run at him, runs him over. And then that kind of catches your attention. Then there's a couple more times where you see Bedard running at guys, and Like, he wasn't able to get it going offensively. And I love it. Like, I appreciate players who have different elements to it. And it kind of made me think of this. McDavid, Crosby, take your pick at all the players who have been the best players, the generational types. They came into the league and everyone locked in on them. Everyone was there giving them an extra shot, an extra shove, making sure they were getting hit, they were getting bumped. You know, they had to deal with a lot of unfavorable treatment over the course of their careers. And what have they had to do? They've had to fight for space. Like Sidney Crosby, right from day one. He was never shy to stick a guy back. He's dropped the gloves. Like, he has a mean streak and a feistiness to him. We've seen it from McDavid. Like, did he not just elbow? Who did he elbow in the face? Was it Corey Perry? Like, he's had a few where you're looking at it and you're thinking, if that's not McDavid, if that's Joey fourth liner, like, that guy's getting suspended, right? So these guys have done, you know, throughout the course of their careers, they've had to clear space for themselves. So I think that was the thing that was eye-opening about Bedard, especially for, listen, only one team is going to get Bedard, and it's going to be the team that picks first overall. We all know that. But if you're that team and you watch that game last night, you're like, I saw something that I haven't seen from Bedard in the past, and I haven't had to see because he's been so dominant with his play with the puck. It's that when the going gets tough, and this guy needs to find a way to clear some space for himself or, you know, fight back or push back, he's going to do it. And so I think that was a really, really interesting, I guess, moment for Bedard, a cool story for him to tell about his game.
And it's the one thing he can do in one game, right? Because we say this about the World Junior Tournament, and that's 7 games.
Yeah.
Don't put too much stock into this. It's only 7. It's only a 7-game sample. Well, this is only a 1-game sample, for heaven's sake. So even less relevance. But, you know, the guy on the third line for one of the teams last night, he could have a goal and 2 assists, and you're not going to read a ton into it because it's one game. But that's one thing you can answer in just one game. I can play tough. If you don't think I play tough, watch me here against some of the best peers that are available to me. And I think he answered that.
I'll even stretch it out a little bit further. If Connor Bedard goes out in that game and he scores 2 goals and 2 assists, it's awesome. We're all talking about it. It's great. We've all seen that story. We've all seen that episode before.
Nothing new.
Nothing new. But we haven't seen the Connor Bedard that takes runs at guys and goes into the pile after the team scored and is giving guys shots to the head. It's like, it's almost better for him the way it worked out, because now everyone in the building, everyone who watched the game, it's a little bit of an eye-opener as to like, okay, when this guy gets to the NHL, and Corey Perry's around and he wants to stick him or he wants to give him a little shot or he wants to put a glove in his face, this guy's going to be right there, right back at you, giving it back to you. So I think it was great. I think it worked out perfectly for Bedard.
Well, in today's NHL too, Frank, like for a long time we were lauding, and we're still seeing it, the Cole Caulfields of the world are having wonderful success. The small guy can still do something in the National Hockey League. But the unfortunate part for the small guy now is the big guys are starting to move really well, too. The Tage Thompsons of the world are here as well. And that will make it hard. If the guys at 6'4" are starting to move really quickly as well, that is a problem. You need to show that you can withstand it all, and that's going to answer some questions about Bedard. I mean, he was number 1. You can't go higher than number 1 anyway. But it's going to prove, I think, or give confidence that he's going to be able to translate to the National Hockey.
Yeah, I always found this fascinating, right? So when I was playing in the league, mostly third pair guy, so you play a lot against the third line, fourth line, and then you kind of realize, wait a sec, there's a guy on that third line who's 6'3", but he might be the fastest skater on that team. Like he boogies around the ice, and guess what he's trying to do? He's trying to run me. So in a way, like, that's a dangerous kind of player, right? And we're seeing more and more of that. Like, Tage Thompson is super skilled. He obviously doesn't play that game. But, you know, like, the first guy that comes to mind is Reeves, obviously, right? Like, in his prime, he's a monster, and he could fly around the ice. And, like, we had a player in Vancouver who was not a monster like that, but he was a busy player, in Dale Weiss, who, like, Dale was a bigger guy. He was one of the fastest guys, and he was flying around trying to take guys' heads off. And so, like, it is you're right. Like, those big guys are not tree stumps that can't move anymore. And I think that's pretty fascinating. But for him, like, you know, he's 5 foot. What is he? 5'10"?
I think the highest one is 5'11". The estimate that
like,
he's 5'11".
Like maybe if he's having a good hair day, he's 5'11". You know, so like it's really important for him to show that he can, you know, play through some unfavorable circumstances. And I think if you looked at his offensive chances last night, he still created. He didn't execute. Like he didn't finish on many of them. And there was a couple, like there was one I thought he could have brought to the backhand. There was another opportunity where you know, he had the puck in a pretty good spot and he kind of just hit the goalie on. But I just think it was a good showing for him to show that he's not going to back down, and push comes to shove, he'll fight back and push back.
Let me ask you about this player, Frankie, because he's a local kid from Chilliwack, and he may very well align perfectly with where the Canucks are picking, likely in the top 10. What did you make of Zach Benson, the forward from the Winnipeg Ice?
Yeah, I liked him. I talked about him in the pregame, and I actually called his coach in Winnipeg, James Patrick, who was really, really...
Look at you being a reporter and stuff and doing some goodness.
He was awesome to talk to. But, like... So he's a smaller guy. Like he's another guy, 5'9", 5'10" on a good day. And the thing that really stuck out to me was like he welcomes contact. Like he plays well through contact. And for a guy that's 5'9", you're gonna have to be able to play through contact. And he was so agile. Like it wasn't necessarily like the straight line speed that stuck out to me, although he got to where he needed to go in the perfect amount of time, let's say. But it was like anytime you thought you had him cornered, he just had a little extra gear or a little extra getaway, right? And so you package that up with his ability to kind of make decisions fairly quick. And then, you know, like you talk about vision, playmaking ability, passing execution, all that kind of stuff was on full display. But for me, it's like it's the agility and the quick decision making that allows him to kind of have a little extra space and play through guys and make those plays. He was noticeable, and I understand he's playing with Bedard, but it wasn't a benefactor. Like it wasn't like Bedard made Benson look good. Like Benson, he looked good on his own merit last night. He was an impressive player, and like you look at the players that have come through that Winnipeg Ice program recently. Like Benson will be a first round pick, he'll probably be a top 10 pick. They had Savoy, Geeky, Peyton Krebs. Like there's a number of players coming through there. So if you're a young player and you're playing for that coach and you're thinking, okay, what's the formula here? Like, what did these guys do? Like, let's just, you know, so as a player, you look at that, you kind of salivate. You're like, man, like, I just got to be a sponge in this situation and I got to, like, absorb as much as I can. And there's a good chance, like, I can put myself on the map. He's done that. He was great.
Yeah, can't help but think of the people in Cranbrook who are looking at the Winnipeg Ice program and going, man, if we had only had those sorts of players when the team was here in Kootenay. And speaking of good hair days, I had to pull up the Frank Corrado images page on Google. Some of the headshots over the years for the Canucks, Frankie. Oh, my.
Terrible.
Beautiful. Gorgeous salad, including the faux hawk at one point.
Yeah, I like to keep the faux hawk going. After my good buddy Dion Phaneuf, he loved the faux hawk, but I can't tell you how many times like I just forgot it was going to be picture day or didn't know. And you get to the rink and they're like, oh, we need to pull you in for pictures. I'm like, I just got off the bike. Like, okay, throw some water in it. Yeah.
Or for measurement, you talk about good hair adding to the tail of the tape. You probably got a couple of extra inches on the.
You know what I did? On the hockey like my first year in the OHL with Sudbury, I think I probably weighed 170 pounds. I'm pretty sure I stuffed like, you know, those tiny 2.5 pound weights, like the little circular ones. I swear I remember this vividly. I put one in my pocket and I got an extra 2.5 pounds.
Yeah. Analyst, reporter, all-around good guy, Frank Corrado. Thanks for this, buddy. We'll catch up soon.